thank you for coming. There are 143 people signed up. They're either lost somewhere in the V&A or I don't know what's happened, but if people do arrive late, apparently we are going to let them in, so there may be people quietly filtering in, but thank you for making it, thank you for finding your way through the V&A, and thank you for coming. I'm going to introduce my guest, and thank you so much. Yewande is so busy at the moment, I know she is, so when we talked on the phone, it was like, can you do it? And it was like, oh, I can't do that date, I can't do that date, and finally we managed to find the time that she could do it. I'm going to introduce her now, and this is probably one of the longest introductions I've ever done on the podcast. I'm going to embarrass the heck out of you, so I'm sorry, Yewande. So, Yewande Akinola, MBE, innovator, design engineer, speaker, host, visiting professor, University of Westminster, I believe, board member on more than one board, chartered engineer, innovator, dreamer. I could go on. We're going to have plenty to talk about. We've got to squeeze it down. I'm told we've got to be out of here at 10:02, so I'm going to keep a close eye on it, because once I start talking and once I start talking to a guest, I'm off. So I'll keep a close eye on the clock. Yewande, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So I'm going to start with, as we do with all of our guests, and we take you back to your youth and back to school. Where was school for you?
Oh, well, I have to say thank you so much for that very, very warm introduction.
I left half of it out.
It was so unnecessary. Oh, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. And it's such a pleasure to be here. Really, really nice to be able to share the hour with you. School for me was in Nigeria, in the western region of Nigeria. So for those who don't know, Nigeria is in West Africa. It shares borders with French-speaking countries, so it's really a mix of cultures, of traditions, and really of people from lots of different places. So I spent my early years as a young student in about 2 or 3 different schools. The first 3 years of secondary school were in a school called Lone Mountain, and then the last 3 years in a school called the Vale College, where I started to, I guess, work out what I was really interested in.
That's fine. That's fine. And school, enjoyed?
I did. I actually enjoyed school. There was a sense of responsibility, right? You know, I really felt I needed to do very well. So, are you ready for the backdrop? Yeah. Okay. Right. So, my dad passed on when I was really young, and so my mom worked really, really hard to, you know, get us into what I refer to as private schools. You know, you couldn't really. You know, if you wanted to give your child a good education, right, you'd have to, you know, find the money to make sure they attended a private school. And so, you know, I really felt privileged to be attending the schools that I was attending, because I could see that mom was working really hard to, you know, get the school fees at the start of the term. But then also, I had to win scholarships by being the best student in the year to be able to get to the next class. So there was that sense of responsibility in a way, and I really had to, you know, do well in school. So yeah, I couldn't really afford to not enjoy school.
I mean, if I can dig a little bit on that, because if you don't mind, a lot of people that get to your position in any sector really, but in engineering especially, quite often come from a very privileged background, and have quite often had that private education. Money's been there; they could do whatever they wanted really. That wasn't really your experience, was it? I mean, your mum had to graft to get you to where she got you, and that sense of privilege that you just talked about was a driver for you in your early years.
It was a big, massive driver for me in those early years, because I could see that it didn't come easy. I could see that she was working the hours and, you know, really, really trying her best to make sure she gave her 2 kids the very best. But then it also, really took me to this place of possibilities. I always used to get excited by the fact that, yes, I was privileged to be there, but there was an appreciation for the fact that I was there. My friends today will tell you that the one thing they remember from my time in school is I was always wowing at every single thing. I would literally go, wow, because there was that, I was just impressed by everything that I saw. I was grateful that I was there. And yes, there were times I just wanted to be a kid, There were times I was just like, you know what, I just want to, not attend lectures. But because I was my mom's first child, it just felt like, you know what, give this woman a little bit of a slack, yeah.
I'm interested in the whole nature nurture now. We were talking beforehand. I mean, I trawl through the internet trying to find out what I can about guests before we do a podcast. It was easy with you. You've got your own website, and that helped me quite a lot. And you mentioned on there that from a very, very young age, there was a fixation on buildings, bridges, and drawing, and these things. This creativity was in you. Now, I think that's in every child. I think life knocks it out of children as we go through, but that was there. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that sort of natural disposition? I mean, a natural disposition as a young child to bridges is a strange thing.
Yeah, it is a strange thing. So again, I have to start this with my mom because my mom's an artist, and she used to drop us off, at her mentor's house because she needed somebody to look after the kids, right? I'm from a city called, or I grew up in a city called Ibadan, and Ibadan is probably about an hour away from Ile Ife, which is in the Yoruba culture referred to as the cradle of civilization, right? And so, we're at the V&A right now. If you go to some of the museums around here, I'm sure you would see art that's come from Ile-Ife, right? The bronze heads and things like that. And so I used to spend a lot of time in Demas Nwoko. And if you Google him, he's one of the great, architecture artists that has come out of Africa. I used to spend a lot of time in his building. Now, this building is a work of art. There was an amphitheater, right next to the building, made out of mud, but on 2 levels. All of the furniture he had hand carved and sculptured. There were, the bathroom was, made out of, there were tiles that, he had very, very carefully put together from different materials around. And so I was surrounded by this. And whether I was conscious of the fact that I was being influenced by it, I'm not sure. But then that was, I guess, in a way, the way I started to view the world, in terms of, materials, form, shape, color. And so I would look at buildings and go, how has that building been made? Like, where is it come from? And then it helped that Mom always had a stack of paper in the living room. So whether it was 250 grams or even higher, it was always there at the end of the living room. And so when I went on, I guess, that mental journey of being able to, go from, actually, I'm interested in buildings to how about I start to, build models of what is in my head, it was right there to help me and encourage me.
And I understand that completely. I mean, my kids are grown up now, and they constantly take the mickey out of me because any city we're in, I'm looking up.
Yes.
Because when you look up, that's when you see the real architecture. The ground floor level is messed, but up top is where you see it all, and that's where you get those wow moments that you described earlier. You were good at pretty much everything that you did at school by the looks of things. Now, I wasn't, but languages, literature, all of those things were possibilities. Now, 33 years in education, I see a lot of 14, 15, 16-year-olds that wait for inspiration to drop on them as to where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do, what am I meant to be. And there's an anxiety that comes with that as well with a lot of students where they think, I'm 15 and I don't know what I'm going to be. I mean, I'm 59 and I haven't worked it out yet. So at some stage, your mum dropped a little line in there that, you could have more influence as an engineer than you could in other areas. That's a huge statement for a mother to make anywhere, but I guess an African mother, that was a massive statement.
Yeah. I think it's so important that the guidance is there. And, I guess to a certain extent, the encouragement is so important. I speak to a lot of young kids and they're trying to work things out. And it is because it's difficult for them to understand the applicability of certain concepts, right? And I was... I went on that journey and actually I hadn't got it figured out, at the point Mom was saying, oh, why don't you study engineering? In fact, I did it for her.
Right.
I did it for her. Architecture was my longest running. I wanted to become a fashion designer at one point. I wanted to, become a geologist at one point. And architecture was my longest running. In fact, I was so sure I was going to become an architect. And then when she came into my room just before I started to apply to universities and said, why don't you study engineering? I kind of looked around and I went, why, Mommy? Why now? And why are you coming? This has been the plan. The architecture has been the plan for so long. Why are you coming now to disrupt it? But I guess that, first child, that sense of, what, keep Mom happy. I was like, what, Mom? I will explore it for as far as we need to make a decision. And I applied to universities, I think, 2 universities, Warwick University, and I think it might have been Aberdeen, who gave me a place to study engineering. But you're so right. I keep on saying to young people, when you can understand what it is that you enjoy doing, and a lot of young people, they want to just make the world a better place. When you can see your abilities and your passions fitting into our big wide world here in terms of impact, then that you've got a bit of a sign, in the right direction.
It's misunderstood. I think young people are misunderstood. They get quite a hard cut, I think, sometimes. Very few students I found, their driver in life is to be rich. They do want to make a difference. They want to do something that they can finish the work at the end of the day and go home and think, I impacted on somebody's life there in a positive way. And that sounds quite corny, but I believe that that's what drives kids mostly. This was a big move for you. You're 17 years old. You are the eldest in a family. Your dad's passed, so your mum is holding everything together. And your mum's kicking you out the nest. Your mum's saying, you're going to England to get educated, whether you like it or not, and you're going. And that must have been really tough for you and for your mum.
Yeah, that was tough. I'd been by her side for as long as I could remember. My younger sister had moved to the UK years before I eventually ended up here, and she was having a great time, in boarding school in Surrey, and and I was going to, stick with Mum and solve Africa's problems. That was, I'd gotten a place to study architecture at Witwatersrand in South Africa, and I was, that was the path. I'd seen it all. I'd imagined myself becoming, an architect who designed and developed housing solutions for people across Africa. And then Mom comes into my room and says, actually, you remember the applications that we put into universities in the UK? I'm like, yes, Mum. It's like, yes, we're following through. You've got your place at Warwick. We're not deferring it anymore. You are going to study engineering. And I asked her why. And I guess this is the interesting thing about parents and I guess, parenting, right? She was willing at that point to let go because she was so intentional about giving me the best. She was really ready to put herself, aside and just give me the very best. in terms of, you know, an education. And actually, she also wanted me to be as close as possible to my sister. You know, I think she was thinking, actually, I really want you girls to grow up together and have similar experiences.
Wow, I mean, that is a wow moment. I mean, there must have been tears at that airport.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And I can remember just thinking, wait, why is she doing this? Does she love me? Does she not love me? She's trying to get rid of me. But yes, I think she had a vision.
She certainly did. So Warwick University, now the degree that you did, it was a bachelor's degree, engineering design and appropriate technology. I love that title.
Yeah.
I love that title. I've looked it up on it. I don't think the same degree exists now.
No,
so
it's gone.
Tell me what appropriate, you know, what was in that degree and how did it flick the switch? Did it confirm for you that the right decision had been made to come over?
It absolutely did. So it was, we called it EDAT, Engineering, Design and Appropriate Technology. And it was the only compromise, you know, that I was kind of willing to go with at the time, because it was an engineering design degree with a massive bias towards developing countries, right? You know, we don't use the term developing countries anymore. We say emerging economies, okay? And it was the only thing that I could really, in my head, come to terms with, because it was engineering that would solve the problems of the world. So whether I was an engineer in Asia or in Africa or in South America, I would, you know, be able to use the design learning to bring positive impact to people's lives, which was the only thing I understood at that time.
It was it flicked the switch. It was, I'm here. This is what I'm doing.
Yes.
And from there you moved to Thames Water.
Yes.
Now there's and I may have picked this up falsely online. So tell me if I have. But there's, excuse the pun, there's an undercurrent of water all the way through everything you've studied. And I know I spent 3 weeks. I'm not comparing it at all to your experience, but I spent 3 weeks in Zambia at a school in Zambia.
Oh, wow.
And water was just such a precious commodity there. I understand anyone would have a fixation on it coming from there.
Yeah.
But this has come through your career and come through your studies all the way through.
Yes. And so, do you know what, this was, you know, and I have to give my professor, Colin Oram, like all the credit, because I remember, you know, rocking up to his office within like the first couple of weeks of me starting in my first year. Completely lost. I was completely lost. You know, I didn't know if I was coming or going. I didn't know what was going on. I was like, it was just such a different experience for me. And I remember like knocking on his door, and there he was with his great big white beard and, you know, that big massive smile. And he said, come on in. His office was the most chaotic space I've ever seen. But then he had worked on projects all over the world. He had this wealth of perspective in that he was, you know, he was able to go from let's design donkey carts to solve transport problems in Zimbabwe and Zambia, to let us go solve some water issues with a pump in Mahanclef in Wales, right? It was just that breadth of things. And so when I started to, you know, work with him, there was a transition that needed to happen in that I really needed to be able to, you know, conceptualize and really understand like the practical applications of engineering. I was really missing that when I started my degree. And so I went on this journey with him, and water just stood out. We went on field trips, and our field trips were pretty much, fix that pump in the middle of nowhere, right? There'd be a pump sat just on the side of a little stream, and it'd be like, when you see that as a challenge, what is the first thing that you think of in terms of solving it? And so I became interested with, you know, as a child, I'd spent, you know, a lot of time sourcing water, you know, in Nigeria. So it just made sense as a potential way to help, you know, people And also I had the support as well from Colin Oram. And then Thames Water, the opportunity came. There were other e-datas who had worked with Thames. And so, I spent a year there just, really learning how to become an engineer.
And you moved then to Arup afterwards, and Arup, this thirst for more knowledge was once you open that box, it's hard to close it, isn't it? And it was Cranfield University and a Masters in Innovation and Design for Sustainability.
Yeah.
I can see how those two degrees sort of dovetail into each other nicely.
Absolutely.
And did the Masters, I mean, my Masters, I didn't enjoy my first degree, I endured my first degree. I loved my Masters because it was all about me.
Yeah.
It was the most selfish thing I've ever done. Did you feel like that with the Masters? Was it, did it really, was there joy in it?
Oh, there was so much joy in it because there was context, right? Because I'd spent time in industry really understanding what good design was. And because I had spent time in industry applying my engineering principles and building the confidence to be able to use those design principles in the design of buildings, I went into it just exploring possibilities, right? And it's so different, between your first degree and your master's. In your first degree, you're trying to work out what you're doing. You're trying to work out what lectures to attend. You're trying to work out, you're trying to make sense of everything. But with the master's, you're going, actually, I'm learning this so I can take it back to this.
Yeah.
And it makes such a massive difference. I'd had a great time, with the team at Arup. My boss, David George, was out of this world. And so I knew that from every lecture, everything I took from every single lecture, I could take it straight back to our design team meetings. I could take it straight back to our work table and say, actually, we're becoming innovators now. And we're becoming innovators for sustainability. It just made so much sense. So it was such a joyful experience.
It's I think that's quite often missing from schools is that context. So many students, why am I learning this? And if you can explain how they're going to use it in the real world, then that context drives them.
Yeah.
I've had 15-year-old boys chasing me down the corridor saying, I want more maths.
Wow.
Because of a visiting lecturer that came in and gave that context. And it was like, I want to be them.
Yeah.
I want to be like them. So for obvious reasons, and it is obvious reasons, and the more I researched you, it became really, really clear. You are now, whether you like it or not, and this is something I want to ask, you've become a very, very strong voice in the movement to increase diversity within engineering. You're obviously an excellent role model. I mean, that stands out, and that's an obvious from the outside. How, that could be a weight on people's shoulders. Does it feel like that, or does it feel like something that you've embraced?
Well, all right, okay, so So there is that thing that's always in my head, right? And it's the saying, to whom much is given, much is expected, right? So in a way that has always, inspired and strengthened me in that I've received so much, from the people around me, the people who've encouraged me, even the people who've slammed doors in my face, right? I feel like I've gotten so much out of it, and it only makes sense, for me to be able to share that with people who need to hear. I'm aware that not everybody would have the experience and the journey that one has had, and so it's so important that wherever I can, I share. The other thing that is always helpful as well is I'm always so inspired by the people that I meet. A few days ago, I met somebody who I'd first met her in school. So I'd gone and done a talk in her school. And since then, she's been to Warwick, graduated, done an engineering degree, and she's now doing so well. In so many ways, that is my reward, Yeah. It is the satisfaction that, I then use and need to then keep myself moving somehow, because there are days that it's kind of hard to get out of bed, right? But then with that at the back of my head, I go, actually, you know what? In 2012, when you know, or 2013, when you did that trip to that school in Ilford, right? You had no idea that 1 hour would bless you in the way that it has.
Wow, that's a fantastic way to look at it. Can I ask your opinion then on students, and like, as an ex-head teacher, I used to sit with parents that said, I want my son, my daughter to go into medicine. I want them to go into law. I want them to go into finance. I don't want them to go into engineering. And that is something that we struggle with, and with girls especially. I mean, I think the research says that by the age of 13, about 70% of girls or more have switched off engineering as a possibility even in their career. Why do you think that is? Because I look at it, I'm fortunate to get into lots of engineering companies, and the excitement that it brings me, just seeing what's happening.
Yeah.
And this emerging technologies that are making us able to do stuff that we couldn't do 3 years ago. We're not telling that story, are we?
Yeah, we need to tell that story. Over the years, you know, I've seen lots of different institutions and organizations, and, you know, the DTA as well are doing amazing work, but that work needs to continue. The challenge is a lot of people are exposed to a thinking that is not correct. You know, people go, oh, why do you want to become an engineer? You know, I've had young people come up to me and say, oh, you know, this person doesn't think I should become an engineer. This person doesn't think I should become an engineer, etc. And actually what we need to do is not force them down a route, but help them understand that creativity is also equivalent to engineering. Right? You know, I keep on saying to the young people in my life, I'm like, get past the maths that sometimes seems difficult, right? And it's just a perception. You know, I'm not the most mathematical. You know, physics, I sometimes struggle with concepts, but if I can see where it's leading me to, if I can see that it's going to help me design, you know, a bench or a stool or a chair that would be sturdy enough, or a building that would have form and shape but still withhold, you know, loading or whatever, it makes more sense. So I think we need to just get better, because girls have a very creative approach to things. You know, it's color, its shape, its form, its applicability. And until we start to tell engineering stories in that way, you know, we won't capture the imagination of the numbers of people that we really need to be capturing.
I agree completely. Half of my teaching career was in girls' schools. And in girls' schools, you can paint a different story because you haven't got the boys in there to diss it. So the girls, it's like, you know, I can go where? Great, I'm going there.
Yeah.
Whereas in boys' schools, the boys will knock that back sometimes. There's a mindset to this as well, isn't there? Because, I mean, on your website, there is a little statement on there. There's a few statements on there that I picked out, but one was, difficult isn't impossible. I love that. That is all about positivity, and it's about mindset. And I really think now, with hindsight, we should have taught this at school. We should be teaching kids to look for positives, not to dwell on negatives. That mindset is in you, you know, you can feel it. Where's that come from? Has that come from your mum, do you think, or has it come from a range of places? And then how do we share that with as many people as possible? Not just yours, but in education. I think education should be a positive place. Kids have got to enjoy going in. If they enjoy going in, you'd be amazed at the number of 14-year-olds I met that didn't like what was looking back at them from the mirror. And that's the biggest job of schools, I think, is to work on that.
Yeah, and wow, you know, gosh, you know, the difficulty is not impossible. I guess to a certain extent is my coping mechanism in a way, in that, you know what, even though it's a bit of a challenge at the moment, right?
Sleeves up.
Exactly, yes. We can do it. And I have to be that way, right? Some people say fake it till you make it, and actually it's worked for me for a number of years, because by doing that, you're putting yourself in that place where you are giving yourself a bigger chance for success. You're taking that initial step. You're allowing yourself, be a beneficiary of the stars aligning, right? And you're allowing yourself to meet the right people and have conversations with the right people and open doors that would not have opened if you were not in that space. Sure. And so I really rely on that. In school, so I've got a 5-year-old. And she would often come to me and say, "Mommy, I can't. Mommy, I don't know how to." And I always kind of say to her, I'm like, "Girl, let's just do some good thinking. You sit down and let's do good thinking." And yes, now she still says I can't, which is fine. I say I can't sometimes. But she goes, "Okay, maybe we can do some good thinking on this." And she would come to me when she's done some good thinking and say, "Mommy, I've got a good idea." And that's all we need. Yeah. That is all we need.
You just got to keep that mind open. Yeah. If you keep the mind open, stuff will come in. I'm aware that I want to go to some questions from the audience in a second. Before we do, I've got one final question that I want to ask. This is going to go out we're going to release it as a podcast called Designed for Life, if you want to pick the podcast up afterwards. And it will go out, and there's a lot of people in school that will listen to this. And if there was one piece of advice that you had to give a young person listening to this today, that from your experience you feel would help them in order to, maybe they're thinking design, engineering, architecture, those might be for me, but I'm not sure. What would your advice be?
I would say, please stay with the thoughts and with the interest. Don't let anything derail you, because we need engineers. I think there's a shortfall of like 250,000 engineers. If we don't get them in now, we're in trouble in this country. I would say explore, check out what the institutions are doing, check out what DTA are doing, check out what universities and organizations are doing. Find companies who have open day sessions, right? Go to those open day sessions and ask questions. Ask your teachers questions. I know there's always the challenge of exams and, you trying to work out what you need to do to be able to pass an exam. But you're allowed to think about what you really enjoy doing and the journey as well, right? And as part of that journey, go out, explore, speak to people, send me a message, find me on LinkedIn. I will definitely get back to you.
Fantastic. One of the podcasts that we did was a graduate engineer just starting her first job with Laing O'Rourke.
Oh,
and
great.
The excitement that she had, but that all stemmed from a member of her family was working on HS2.
Yeah.
And she just went along to have a look at it and just thought, wow, I need to be part of this. Yeah. We're going to go to the audience. Is there anybody that would like to ask a question? If not, I've got another 50 here that I could fill in with. But if there's anybody that would like to ask a question, we have got a mic. Everyone's very shy. Okay.
It's been lovely to have you here.
I'm going to ask one last question then. Before we talked, you've got your MBE, which is, it's endorsed all of the chances that your mum took all those years ago. And you said she's coming over in 3 weeks' time to pick it up, which is going to be such a proud moment. I said she's going to be 12 feet tall. She's going to walk in, and it's going to be amazing. And I'm looking forward to seeing the photos.
Yes.
But what are you professionally most proud of? If you had to put your finger on something and say, that so far is what I'm really, really proud of.
Very good question. I tell you what I kind of keep on going back to with lots of gratitude. And it's pretty much the fact that engineering has been a universal language for me. And so I've had the opportunity to design buildings and work with teams in different parts of the world. I love the fact that, you know, if you go to southern China, there is an incredible hotel and water park that has my name written all over it. I like the fact that, you know, there are projects across Africa and in the Middle East that I've been part of as well. I love the fact that there's projects I've worked on here. And that is the beauty of engineering. The fact that it transcends the barriers that sometimes, you know, other careers sometimes present. I mean, if it's law, for example, I'm not dissing any lawyers, but law, you have to learn the law of the land. But engineering, you can apply those principles, the fact that you're designing for human beings to, you know, really thrive in spaces and enjoy spaces, and that is pretty much applicable in different parts of the world. If you're designing a flood defense system, it's a flood defense system here in the UK as well as in Pakistan or, you know, or in Taiwan.
Amazing answer. Good design improves lives, makes lives better.
It does. It really does.
Thank you to everybody for coming. I want to thank, I mean, the podcast is sponsored by the Edge Foundation and by PTC OnShape. If they didn't sponsor it, we wouldn't be here today. So a huge thank you to them. And thank you to everyone for turning up. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.